some of the trends or what's changed, but everything's sort of largely gone in the same direction. So I was going to cover a few areas quickly. I tried to delete a lot of the slides because it was a much longer talk at Echelon in Singapore, but the areas covered is just generally Asia and the diversity and the size and magnitude. Mobile trends across the region in the different countries. OTT app explosion is a term commonly used in Asia. It's over-the-top apps, it's smartphone apps. Because before there were smartphone apps, we commonly had telco embedded apps in Asia, which were quite common. And the messaging app phenomenon, obviously, with WhatsApp and Viber and Tango last week being invested in, there's a lot of things that have happened post these slides being written that have made it even more interesting space, but I'll tell you a little bit about what's going on in Asia with all those players and a bunch of other homegrown players. So first, why does Asia matter? Because 62% of the world's population is within this little circle here. So it's a very, very concentrated set of people from India up through China and Japan. And most of where we're from, Southeast Asia, as you'll see in some of the economic slides later, is quite big as well when you look at it as a group. It's really hard to bend down. So it's a highly diverse population. It's quite different. There's 52 different primary languages. That means official languages of the country, not to mention 1,000 different dialects beyond that. Oh, awesome. And 27 different currencies. We've got the lowest and the highest GDP per capita. Not the lowest, but one of the lowest. And Singapore has the highest. And obviously very different political and legal regimes throughout the region. What is it called? Let's see. Yep. Awesome. Thanks, Tom. And it's also much more mobile-centric than internet-centric. So you got about a billion internet subs, about 3 billion mobile subscribers, and interesting prepaid dominant. So prepaid outnumbers postpaid about 5 to 1 across the region. Feature phones are also quite dominant, except in Korea, Japan, and now China, which have largely grown in terms of smartphone penetration. Feature phones still dominate most markets and make up 80+% of the market in the other bigger markets in South and Southeast Asia. Credit card penetration is also extremely low, so a lot of people, payments is a big issue. A lot of the VCs you heard talking earlier, a lot of the payments companies, or a lot of the companies that invested in are trying to solve the payments issue. 2% credit card penetration in most of Southeast Asia, so even if users has a smartphone, wants to buy something, they can't buy anything because they have no way to pay for it. And consumer loyalty is very, very low. So the switching of services from one to the other, the price elasticity or price sensitivity of users is extremely high. Lots and lots of great examples of this. Price elasticity example. In Singapore every year they raise the prices of taxis. Right before they raise the prices of taxis, you're in a line and you'll be in line for a taxi for an hour and it's just so hard to get a taxi. All of a sudden they raise the price like 2%. It's literally very, very small incremental amount, like 10 cents per ride or something. And then it's like there's taxis everywhere. It's so easy to get taxi all of a sudden. So price sensitivity, and it slowly gets worse as the year goes on. And this is the wealthiest country on a GDP per capita basis in the world. So that's where price sensitivity is at the extreme, and consumer loyalty too. Like consumers will switch services very quick, especially for price. Did you have a question?
Just like on the payment issue, I just thought it's kind of important to note, like in places like Japan, that people do actually buy a ton on their phone.
So the only thing I would caveat, yes, Japan is very, very different. So Asia is diverse. Japan, Southeast Asia, all the countries in Southeast Asia are very different. I'll try to highlight some of those differences. There's a lot of transactions that happen on the phone in general. What happens in Japan is definitely different than what happens in India, and that's different than what happens in China, so totally agree. Internet growth, 65% of the world's internet growth over the last 5 years has come from Asia. It's going to be even more in the next 5 years. You got it before I flip on? So the BRIC countries, the BRIC countries, actually 77% of the BRICS GDP is in Asia. And if you look at the BRIC and you toss Southeast Asia into that mix, it's actually, a size of a BRIC country itself. It's actually bigger than Russia and Brazil, and somewhere just under India. So if you look at it in terms of three big economies, Southeast Asia, even though it's a very diverse set of countries, India and China take up the lion's share of the BRIC. Sometimes you see the BRIC with the double I, which is Indonesia. Us in Singapore like to group the whole region into it because most people don't just go after Indonesia, but they go after the whole region. I'm sorry I'm going like super fast, so if you want me to click back so you can take your picture, just let me know. So going into the mobile trends across the region. So 65% of the population of mobile subscribers in the world are in Asia. That number is growing as mobile penetration starts to cap out in most of the world. It's growing still very fast in Asia. As you can see, actually, whereas most of the world's above 100% penetration already, here's Asia and here's the future predicted growth. So still lots of growth. You know, one thing that's interesting when I talk about consumer loyalty, you know, the dual SIM car or the dual SIM phone is very, very popular across Asia because you'll get one phone carrier that has a great outgoing free minutes plan and one that's incoming free SMS, and you'll use each SIM for each use case. And so it's all about minimizing the spend. It's definitely a mobile first set of countries. Very, very mobile centric. Strong correlation to income, although some of those are different, like Japan or Korea, where there's a high income, but it's still very mobile centric. This is interesting. So they're very mobile centric, but it's mobile centric for different reasons. So in Japan, in Japan and Korea, you got extremely high internet penetration, but mobile internet penetration is also very high, and so mobile usage is surpassed internet usage, fixed line internet usage about 5 years ago now. And in the rest of Southeast Asia and South Asia, you've always had a higher mobile penetration, so you've always had higher mobile usage than fixed line internet usage. If you look at India, for instance, India has, they just passed 100 million, but they were, last year they were at 60 million internet subscribers, 900 million, 950 million mobile subscribers, so huge, huge difference. Yeah, in China, same occurrence. So feature phones. These are phones that aren't what you carry in San Francisco. They're not iPhones, they're not Android phones. Most of Asia is still dominated. Obviously, small countries like Singapore with 5.5 million people are very smartphone savvy. Like I said, this is old, like 6 months old. It's almost 50-50 in China now. Japan and Korea are very dominated by smartphones. But a lot of the rest of Asia is still dominated by feature phones, so putting an app out there for end users is not, it won't be able to penetrate or won't be able to have the same sort of network effect that you have in a high smartphone penetration place. So if I'm on WhatsApp and I want to send a message to my friend and I'm in India, the chances are 9 out of my 10 friends don't have a phone that can download WhatsApp. So it's just it's something you have to think about when you're penetrating, going after these markets. Smartphone penetration is growing, but even if you look a couple years out, well, this is 5 years out, it's still, here's the 50% line. I mean, it's still, most of the countries are still below 50%, even out 3 years from now. So it's growing, and it's growing really fast. Definitely outgrowing feature phones, but it's still, feature phones aren't going away anytime soon. Yeah. I think it's 2.4 billion feature phones today, so just to give you a sense of the magnitude. There's lots of companies that go after just the feature phone side because there's a very big underserved population there. Okay, any questions before I go on to the smartphone apps? Yes?
What's the average number of smartphones per user?
The average number of smartphones per user.
Or phones per user, because when I was in Asia, I tend to see people with more than just
Like me?
Yeah,
no, that's not, it's definitely very common. SIM cards per user is very high. Phones per user, I assume the people you were hanging out with weren't the village elders. because it's actually kind of a low number. It's just in the urban, wealthier populations, lots of phones exist. And now that there's dual SIM cards, pretty common, you don't see it as much. I mean, even friends here that I have that are out from Asia, I'm still carrying 2 phones because iPhone doesn't have a dual SIM phone. And I'm very Apple loyal. My friends who aren't, they all have 2 SIM phones. Yeah.
I think just one quick observation on the smartphone penetration. I think there is certainly a higher penetration of feature. The one kind of exciting thing is the people who can afford the smartphone represent the market that have a pretty high ARPU. So I think one of the challenges is that when people look at Asia, they go, oh, but the ARPU, the average revenue per user is really low. But when you actually slice Asia up, in each country there are these populations that actually do earn a lot of money. And most of those people are, a good number of them are the smartphone users. So if you're doing something like a virtual goods play or something that is transactional, those people tend to have significantly higher income than the rest of the population.
Yeah, there's a very big income discrepancy. I would say there's things that are more interesting than that actually. So, for instance, in our service, we're available on feature phones and smartphones. And our ARPUs per feature phone user is about 100 times greater than our smartphone users. So the price, the ability to pay might be lower for the smartphone users, but the willingness to pay on a feature phone user is much higher because they have much less services. You're not competing against 800,000 other apps on a feature phone. You're competing against 10 other services, right? So the share of what you can capture and the willingness to pay versus so much being free on a smartphone is much less on a feature phone. So I think that actually is a more interesting stat for a lot of companies because in India, there's a lot of guys that pay $50 a phone on their ARPU, but it's a very small piece of the population versus there's this very large base that's willing to pay that's out there as well. So, who's familiar with the term VAS? So, yeah, we used to have this ecosystem called VAS, Value-Added Services. It's basically all those apps that were on the phones in Asia before smartphones came out. So, over the last 3 years, it used to be a big market, especially in China and India. Big players all went public, had huge market caps, and now have come down crashing. It's happened country by country, basically due to regulatory bodies cracking down. So it was a pretty, I won't go through all of them, but each of the major countries cracked down one by one. And what was happening is all these shady practices. Local companies would falsely charge users and take money off their prepaid account and falsify logs and say, hey, look, they paid for this service. And they do it by the millions of users. So you'd go top up and your money would be gone because people are like, oh, you signed up for XYZ porn service or something. And they'd have to fight and be on hold. Literally, like Airtel India got 1.5 million calls per day to dispute charges because it was so widespread. If you go into like Telkomsel in Indonesia, for 1.5 years they had police in the offices like monitoring what people are doing. Like the police know if you're falsely charging people, but that's how like serious they got in all these countries. And finally, instead of just cutting out a couple of the bad trees, they burned down the forest. So fortunately, the app ecosystem has replaced it. This is also dated. China actually is the largest now in terms of app growth. But you look at the countries in pink, and Asia is one of the largest sets of countries in terms of app growth in the world. However, price sensitivity and ability and willingness to spend on apps is much lower. It's changing as the business models change. So when apps first came out, it was either you give a free app or you give a paid app, or you give an ad revenue model, right? Ad revenue model absolutely does not work yet in Asia, outside of a few countries like Japan, because the ad market, digital ad spend is so low. It's still really small. I'll give some numbers on that in a sec. But also, if someone's going to charge someone for an app in Asia, they're 1/6 as likely to buy it as they are in the US, the paid version versus the free version. So there's a big difference. The other big problem with apps is the minimal spend is 99 cents. If we poll the prepaid users of our 100 million users on our service, their prepaid cards and how much balance they have on it, 92% of them don't even have $1 on their prepaid card. So to ask someone to spend $1 when 92% of users don't even have $1 on their card, it's impossible, right? So lower purchasing power, obviously higher price sensitivity. We hammered that one to death. Digital ad spend. So take a country like India. Last year, India had $140 million of digital ad spend, including online, including Google AdWords. It was like 15% of that was mobile. So go try to build a mobile business based on ad revenue when the total market's $20 million. Last year's total digital ad spend, Indonesia, $14 million, 15% mobile. I mean, it's just, these are such small numbers. Like this building, because of who's right next door, has more ad spend and revenue going through them than all of those countries combined, right? So it's, and they just started monetizing. That's how small the market is today. So I love it when my friends come out from the US and they're like, oh, why don't you charge for your service? Why don't you just put ads on it? I'm like, great, I'll put up ads, who's gonna fill them? And then credit card penetration. Charging for services or anything commerce related is very difficult to do just because of very low credit card penetration. In some markets, we have high credit card penetration, like one market we play in, which isn't in Asia, Saudi, very high credit card penetration, but no one will ever use their credit card to purchase anything online. In many of the markets, Thailand's the same thing. People have credit cards, they'll never put their credit card on their phone because after what happened with their phones and all the phones getting charged for services, no one trusts. And here, like when I went to Barcelona a few months ago, my credit cards, all three of my credit cards got faulty charges on them. I called my US cards, reversed right away, I was liable for what, $50. Singapore was like a 3-month ordeal, I never got them reversed. So like the credit card, there's not the consumer protection and credit in the same way there is here, and the banks are not consumer friendly. And so people are very, very sensitive about giving away credit card details or anything like that online because you'll never get that money back. It's like giving your bank account away. Okay, messaging apps, I gotta end it soon. I moved to Asia about 6 years ago, and about 3 years ago, it still looked like this. There was all these different, every country had its different social media company. There was High Five, there was Orchid. All these companies that were like the graveyard of social media companies here in the Valley still had their second life over in Asia. And then all of a sudden, Facebook woke up and decided to conquer Asia. They took off very, very fast. I saw them go from 3 people in the building, the office across the street in Singapore. I think they're 180 today, and they've got presence in all the countries. They literally within 6 months. So one time I came home from work, and my wife, who's Thai, was translating. She's big on Facebook because we're from here, and she was translating Facebook's page, the buttons, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" And she goes, "Oh, they asked me to translate their site, so I am." So Facebook just all of a sudden crowdsourced the translation to all these countries of their heavy users that they saw typing in certain languages. And literally, within 6 months of that, Facebook had overtaken High Five, and High Five was completely crushed in Thailand. Obviously, the one anomaly being China, because Facebook's blocked there. Once again, gated. It's gone way up the charts for all of them in terms of active countries and active cities in Facebook. Although the only downside I would say about Facebook in Asia is the use case is very, very different. So when it started here, it was very much exclusive, and you let some friends on, and it was what's acceptable for accepting a friend here is very different than what happens in Asia. So here I only friend my past friends or people I know quite well. There it's like everybody. Like I'll get at least 10 requests a day per country from people I have no idea who they are. And then if you accept them, you get like tagged on all these photos. You go to the photos and they're selling goods with price tags. They're using it like eBay. I mean, just the use cases are very, very different. Most people have like 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 friends. I'll go to meetings. Like in Japan, they use it almost like LinkedIn. I'll go to meetings. I'm done with the meeting. The guy that didn't even speak English that was like in the corner in the meeting, I get back to my office and I've got a Facebook request from this guy. I'm like, he didn't even say hi. Yeah, I'm not going to go through all of it because I'm limited on time. Asians share everything. Facebook model works great because it's free. The whole privacy concerns and what do they know about me and all that, the things you hear about here in the US, no one cares. Like the whole NSA scandal, like, do you think the Chinese really care? Like, Twitter's also very hot and taken off. So messaging apps. Lots of messaging apps. What's going on? I'll go through this really quickly. The way I look at it, I sort of break it off. There's synchronous, like I'm talking to you live. Asynchronous, I'm sending you a message, don't want to talk to you. There's the 4 different medias: video, photo, voice, text. And then there's subcategories of friend-to-friend, group messaging, private group messaging, and one-to-many, sort of public Twitter sort of phenomenon. And in these categories, we see all the messaging app players that have made a lot of noise. A lot of social media players, a lot of these guys are gone. It's only been 6 months. And then the VoIP players. And we see a lot of convergence between them, everyone trying to do everything. Cool thing is, in the last 15 years or 20 years, the time to get to scale has dramatically decreased. So it took 15 years to get 50 million mobile subscribers since the first mobile phone was shipped. It took 10 years to get 50 million SMS users after the first SMS was sent. It took a little over 4 years for Facebook to get to 50 million users. It took a little under 4 years for Twitter to get to 50 million users. It took a little under 2 years for Instagram to get there. It took about 1.5 years for WhatsApp to get there. Line did it in about a year. And remember, draw something before Zynga screwed it up? They did it in 50 days. So the kind of the virality at which you can grow is increased so much that it's just completely disrupted all of the countries and the apps and how fast they're going. This is probably the slide that has changed the most in the last 6 months. All the big Asian players, there's Line, Kakao, and WeChat have gone very aggressively after Southeast Asia and South Asia. You can't go into Jakarta without seeing a building with WeChat, Line, or Kakao on the site. I mean, they've taken over TV commercials, billboards, buildings, celebrities, everything. So it's a big market share war right now. You know, I remember walking through the mall in Manila the other day, and there must have been 60 women in like tiny little skirts walking around, going up to every guy, getting them to download WeChat. I mean, it was like the marketing tactics are unbelievable. In terms of what's happening on the ground, so China and Korea is really, that's where there's a clear winner. Kakao dominates Korea, no one's going to take it from them. China, WeChat dominates, or Weixin, which is called locally. Both are trying to get out, both have had limited success. WeChat's by far spent the most. It's got a lot of downloads. It's got a very different use case outside of China. It's not necessarily for chatting with friends that you know. Line is also very dominant in Japan, but there are still others there. It's not clear cut, but it's got a very large market share, and the chances are it will win Japan. Line is probably the most successful so far across Southeast Asia. India is fairly split right now between Line and WeChat. WeChat's growing. WeChat, one thing to notice is it's the only one out of all these, if you go to the App Store, that has a 17-year-old plus rating for age requirement to download it, where all the other ones have a 4-year-old plus. Because it has this little feature that a lot of people like to use, which you shake to find who's around you. And I call it the booty call button, but you can call it whatever you want. So, and then they've got, WhatsApp is still pretty strong, especially in India. It was a first mover, but it's just kind of boring because the other problem is they charge you. Like, this is the stupidest business model for Asians. So, there's no virtual goods, there's none of the cute stickers, there's no games, like all the stuff that Asians love, it's just not there. I won't go through all the pricing models. I mean, it's just a couple of quick takeaways. Obviously, it's a strong network effect, winner takes all. Network effect is much stronger in country than cross country, so it could be a winner per country. Very, very intense battleground right now. You know, a lot of people talk about this $19 billion acquisition price, both Line and WeChat are rumored to be spinning off from Naver and Tencent and going to go public for around $29–30 billion. Much higher price points, much lower user bases, but both will do $1 billion plus in revenue this year. Whereas, WhatsApp probably did around $40 million in revenue last year. I know the media reports much differently, but all I have to do is look at the App Annie data and it's right there. Switching costs are also minimal. With Facebook Connect and phone integration to your contacts, to switch from one service, I have them all on my phone, right? And I put them all on the front page, and I see a message pop up here, I just click there. It's so easy to switch from one to the other that this war is never over. It's always going to be going. Obviously, UI, UX are key, and people are starting to realize that. It's not just about having the most features, although WeChat doesn't really realize that because they've got a lot of stuff contained in there, all the way from booking taxis to getting insurance information. Yeah, just to summarize, Asia's obviously a massive but very diverse market. I don't even remember what I wrote 6 months ago. Monetization is obviously very different. You can make a lot more money. So the 3 Asian app players, one Asian app player of those 3 is making more money this year than all the other app providers outside of Asia combined. Think about that. So you can make a lot of money, you just got to alternate the way you try to charge. Yeah, that's it. Any questions? Yes, Japan.
Well,
Your name's Japan, right?
I've been elsewhere, but that's just a place. So what